This year has been a really interesting one in the Jewish community. So many amazing, wonderful things have happened, and so many sad, tragic things have happened. Three things that I want to point out to you today, though, that I think are worth mentioning and spending a couple minutes on. This past year, we lost three great Jewish luminaries. All of them different, all of them unique, all of them representing some part of Jewish life and how in the 20th century these men and what they represent were orienting ideas for how to be Jewish, to answer the question, why be Jewish in the 20th century. The first, this year we lost Gene Wilder. You might remember him from his mix of subtle emotional tragedy, cocktail of comedy and storytelling and sweetness. And earlier this year, we lost the Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel, voice of a generation of survivors of the Shoah, who gave us the phrase "never forget" and taught the world that the opposite of love, is not hate, but indifference. And just last week, we lost Shimon Peres, who never let go of the dream of the state of Israel finding its way to peace. Now, each of these men were Jewish. Each of them were affected by their Judaism differently. They all lived very Jewish lives, though. And these three Jewish men, as common as they were also as different as possibly can be. But all of them were Jewish. The prankster, the prophet, the prime minister. Three men we lost this year. And what they have in common, though, is that Judaism for them was like a talit, a piece of clothing they wore, wrapped around them. For Gene Wilder, it was his sweet sense of Yiddishkeit. And for Elie Wiesel, it was the memory of the Holocaust and survivorship. And for Shimon Peres, it was the bravery and energy that comes from the founding of the Jewish national homeland. We can learn so much from these lives and how to be in the world. And we should remember them today. And how the next generation of Jewish women and men will take up these most important questions about their Judaism for tomorrow. But with their passing, in this past year, there's a real fear in Jewish life that the tectonic plates upon which 20th century Judaism was built are shifting and sliding and moving. And these shifts are worth spending a couple minutes on today. And maybe what we'll talk about is what's coming up next. Gene Wilder was born Jerome Silberman. His father was from Russia, and his mother a descendant of the Poles. He grew up in Chicago, going to an Orthodox synagogue, but he himself was never observant. He became a comedian at age 6. When his mother was struck by a heart attack, and the doctor said to him, "Try to make her laugh." And Gene said once in an interview, and that was the first time he tried to make anyone else laugh. He went on to use this sense of Yiddishkeit mixed with happy and sadness, his sense of Jewishness, to make the whole world laugh. He made cowboys Jewish. He made Broadway Jewish, as if it wasn't already. He even brought this sense of Yiddishkeit to transform a aristocratic British candy factory owner into a Jew. Who makes Willy Wonka Jewish? Gene Wilder does. Why do I feel Jewish? Wilder says, because of my parents' love and their embrace, because they gave me confidence. If my mother hadn't laughed at the funny things I did, I probably wouldn't be a comedic actor, he said. In the 20th century, Gene represented the child of immigrants whose families came from the old world and brought them into the new world. Judaism for Wilder was about being part of a family, but also about being other, coming from a unique outside perspective and forcing your way into American society through culture, through kindness, and no small dose of kvetching. And he wasn't alone. You think about the amazing contribution Jews have brought to this society. I mean, I was just at Western Bagel a couple of days ago, and just the fact that I was able to go to a Western Bagel with a cowboy with the ropes, right? But it's a bagel shop. Someone next to me ordered a blueberry bagel. I don't really understand blueberry bagels. There are only 7 kinds of bagels, and if you're not one of those 7 kinds of bagels, you're just an overcooked donut, in my opinion. Come ask me which ones later. But this Yiddishkeit, this sense of Jewishness, is one of the major orienting ideas of Judaism of the 20th century. It's a sense of community, it's a sense of belonging, a feeling that you're part of something small, but also part of something really large. And for many, many years, we as Jews in the 20th century played that inside-outside game, feeling that we're both Jewish and both American, but that we also had places we could go and places we couldn't go. And so we built parallel worlds in America. We created art and music and comedy for America, but we also created it for ourselves. We built the country clubs and resorts for ourselves because we couldn't go to theirs. We built delis and schools for ourselves. We created charities and aid organizations for America, but also for ourselves. Yiddishkeit is a major foundation of Jewish life, and it's become a major foundation of American life. When I was sitting at a gala the other night, and someone gets up there who is not Jewish and uses the word zaftig to describe someone, you know that Yiddish 2.0 has landed in American culture. Judaism for Jean was about morality, it's about family. And whether it's because of the Shoah or because many others felt that this Jewish wellspring came from which they could draw, Jean never felt that he had to be religious because it was just being Jewish, being Yiddish was just in his DNA. He could do it without a second thought, without intention. And with this passing, though, we're also noticing a passing of Yiddishkeit, a sense of Yiddishkeit fading in the world. What made Jean so unique is his ability to smile, his laughter, but at the corner of his eye, you all know this when you watch his movies, at the corner of his eye, there is always a bit of sweetness, a bit of sadness, a sweet cry, which allows him to be pessimistic and laugh at it at the same time. That's Yiddishkeit. That's Yiddishkeit at its deepest level. And I'm sure there are people who recognize this today. But what happens, friends? What happens when the joke doesn't land anymore? What happens when they don't laugh at it anymore? What's left? The old ways of being Jewish don't work for many. Jean's sense of Jewishness, his Yiddishkeit, is fading. We look around and say, the youth, they don't care as much as we do. We look around and say, they're not affiliating like we did. We look around and say, they don't care for other Jews first as we did. I can quote you studies and reports that say affiliation is down, observance down, giving down, attendance in services down. But the Jewish community is also becoming immensely diverse. Over 10% of the American Jewish community report to be Jews of color, meaning that they are African American and Jewish, Asian Jewish, Latino and Jewish. 17% of Valley Beshalom's membership is Persian. Another 5% is non-Ashkenazi Israeli. Another 3% are Latinos. And when I gave this sermon in the Minyan last night, the Latinos who all happened to be in the playground Minyan start standing up and going like this. Because that doesn't include, though, the very high percentages of intermarriage in American Judaism, peaking over 50% at one point. And if they choose to raise their kids Jewish, those non-Jewish partners are bringing their cultural markers into the relationship and into raising those kids. So they incorporate all of that into new Judaism. And we are becoming an ever more multi-ethnic religion. And Yiddishkeit itself is fading. It's becoming a background of Jewish life, but not the foreground. What will take its place? Quick spoiler alert, I'll let you know. It's built on beautiful foundations, but it's at the end of the sermon, so you'll just have to wait till we get there. Now, Elie Wiesel, he was born in Szeged, Hungary in 1922. Wiesel was raised in the warmth embrace of a living Hasidic community, and in the summer of 1944, he and his family were deported to Auschwitz. In January 1945, as the Russians drew near, Wiesel and his father were forced to march to Buchenwald, where his father, mother, younger sister all died. And after the war, he became a journalist and an author, writing over 50 books. He was the founding chairman of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum and a recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1986. For Elie Wiesel, Judaism had a very different resonance than it did for Gene Wilder. And never really the humorist, he described a world crushed into dust and burnt into ashes, into the kingdom of night. And where Gene made us laugh, Elie Wiesel made us cry. He wrote once in a story, he related that it was the Beatles' custom to rush to the synagogue each morning, to ascend to the bema and shout first with pride and then with anger, "I have come to inform you, Master of the universe, that we are here." Then came the first massacre, followed by many others. The Beatles somehow always emerged unscathed, he wrote. As soon as he could, he would return to the synagogue, rise to the bema, come to the lectern, and he would shout at the top of the voice, "You see, Lord, we are still here." After the last massacre, he found himself all alone in the deserted synagogue. The last living Jew. He climbed to the bema one last time. He stared at the ark, and he whispered with infinite gentleness, "You see, I am still here." He stopped briefly before continuing in his sad, almost toneless voice, "But you, where are you?" For Wiesel, after the Shoah, there were no more miracles. There were no more miracle workers. The gates of heaven were locked up, bound with heavy chains and a padlock, the key to which we misplaced. The theological thinking behind Elie Wiesel's words goes like this. As he wrote in his Nobel speech acceptance, he said, "Yes, I have faith. Faith in God and even in God's creation, without which no action would be possible. And action is the only remedy for indifference, the most insidious danger of all." The solution to the crisis of faith for Elie Wiesel was to survive and build goodness in the world. My father's favorite Jewish liturgy of the entire year, his favorite paragraph of Jewish liturgy, is in the Passover Seder, when it says, "In every generation there have been those who have rose over us and our ancestors to try to kill us, to smite us, but they are all gone and we are still here. Our survivorship is the testament to our theological veracity. And so let us survive and let us never forget." Wiesel's Judaism is that of the survivor, cloaked in night, always living, striving to take a step forward despite our past. There once was something grand and beautiful before Auschwitz, but no longer. And now that both our enemies and heroes are gone, all that's left is us. And we are left behind, and so we build monuments to the past. And let us build schools, let us build synagogues to teach our youth of what happened to us and how we must survive through the era of what Martin Buber called the era of the eclipse of God. Let us add another commandment to this canon, this 614th commandment, the one that encompasses the 613 that comes before, a single commandment to survive, a single commandment to shoulder on, a single commandment to not give Hitler a posthumous victory. For world Jewry, Wiesel's vigor during the greatest tempest in modern history is a paragon of survivalship and the core of Jewish spirit. Why be Jewish? He asked. Because we must survive to prove our strength and to shoulder on. Yet with every passing day, with every passing hour, there are less survivors of the Shoah in the world. The younger generations, my kids, and certainly their kids, will never meet anyone who has survived the Holocaust. They will only know their stories through books, through videos, through audio testimony, but they will not have a relationship with the survivor. Which means the line, never forget, becomes real for the first time, because it is moved from memory to history. It's part and parcel of the shifting that we have in the 21st century. And in the 20th century, surviving after the Shoah was a major idea of why be Jewish in Jewish life. It's part of who they are. It's a foundation, survivorship. But for younger Jews, it's also, like Yiddishkeit, moving from the foreground to the background. It's part of who they are. It's a foundation. But it's not the reason why they are Jewish. And so that same old fear wells up again. Did I do right by my kids? Who will be successful and who will not? Who will give into the favorite college and who will not? Who will stay Jewish and who will not? How will they answer the question, why be Jewish? The fear is real. And so what will arise to take the place of this tectonic shift? Second spoiler alert, something really great, but you have to wait to the end of the sermon. Which brings to the last of these luminous men that we lost. Luckily for us, from the same well springs that brought us Jewish humor and Jewish survivalship, also sprang Jewish courage. Shimon Peres was born Simon Pertsky, and at a young age he was renowned for his oratorical brilliance. I had to practice that 3 times. Oratorical brilliance. And he was chosen as a protege by David Ben-Gurion. He began his political career in the newly formed Yeshuv in the 1940s. He saw the founding of the State of Israel. In fact, in his very long career, he's had every single job in the government of the State of Israel. I'm sure if they had some minister of stamp collecting, he would have had it at one point or another. His first major international negotiation was with President John Kennedy. His last major international negotiation was with President Barack Obama. 10 presidents, 1 man. He saw it all. Shimon Peres was the last of the founders of the state. He saw the rise of the kibbutzim. He saw the draining of the Hula Valley for farmland. He saw skyscrapers rise out of the marshes of Tel Aviv. He saw the railroad built. He saw the airport built. He saw the desert bloom. He saw Jerusalem united. He saw a poor country became a wealthy one, but he never, ever stopped dreaming. He wrote once, "To dream is simply to be pragmatic." He said, "They called me a dreamer, but today, when I look at Israel," he says, we all can see clearly that the greater the dream, the more spectacular the results." And boy, did he ever. One of his last events he ever did was with a company called Oculus. And for younger people, you might know what this is. It's a virtual reality company. And there's a photo of him, Shimon Peres, sitting there with virtual reality goggles on. And you can put that right next to his photo when he arrived to Haifa for the first time. And you see how much Israel has changed and how much he saw it change. He contributed to the building, and he built a country that has solved its own water crisis in the middle of the Middle East. He has contributed and built a country whose medical technology benefits millions of lives around the world. He contributed to the culture of a country that says when there's a national disaster, we, the State of Israel, will be the first on the ground to help you. He saw it all. And the founding of the State of Israel released enormous amounts of energy across the world for Jewish identity. Its influence over Judaism and Jewish identity can never be understated. I'll give you one very simple, very quirky example that sums up the entire project of how Israel has influenced Jews around the world. Growing up in my house, Friday night was the only night of the week that we put out 2 forks, one for dinner and one for gefilte fish, out of the jar. No kidding. Except in summer, sometimes we ate borscht. And my father, because of his background, always ate it with sour cream. And growing up, when my father would say Kiddush, when he would rise for Kaddish, he would do it with an Ashkenazi pronunciation. He would say, Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei Rabbi. Now, around my table, Friday afternoon, we have challah. Friday night, we make challah. Friday afternoon, we make challah. Friday night, we make Kiddush, and we eat hummus with challah. And we don't say hummus. We say hummus. And when I say Kiddush and when I say Kaddish, I say Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbi. And we don't eat hummus out of a jar. We make it from scratch because we learned how to do that from our Israeli friends. Judaism is changing. The founding of the State of Israel has released just this enormous energy that has shaped Jewish education, Jewish understanding, self-understanding, Jewish identity across the world. And Shimon Peres was at the tip of that transformation. The founding of the State of Israel is the third and greatest orienting category for American Judaism in the 20th century. And Shimon Peres saw it all. But the energy that came from being a founder, like Yiddishkeit and like survivorship, is also changing. It's shifting. With his death comes the passing of a great moment in Jewish history. For many younger Jews, Israel's existence is a fact. It's no longer the actor on the stage of Jewish life. It is the stage, the set, and the scenery of Jewish life itself. Which means supporting the State of Israel is part of being Jewish, but it's not the reason to be Jewish. It does no longer answers the question, why be Jewish? Why be Jewish cannot be answered by supporting the State of Israel. Israel is an orienting foundation. It helps answer the question, but like Yiddishkeit and like survivorship, it is moving from the foreground to the background. And that's a good thing. It's a great thing, because it's what the Zionist dreamers wanted all along. Not to create another Jewish community and schools and community centers in Jewish life, but to create the actual terra firma on which Judaism and Jews can live. It's the fruition of Herzl's idea. It's the fruition of Achad Ha'am's idea, not the denigration of those ideas. But that same fear comes back once again. Why don't some of my young feel like I did about the State of Israel? Why don't they feel inspired by Israel like we did? The fear is real. It's real. What's taking its place? With the deaths of these 3 cultural icons, Gene Wilder, Elie Wiesel, and Shimon Peres, we're seeing a major shift in our community's evolution. The 3 greatest orienting ideas of the 20th century, our ethnicity, our Yiddishkeit, remembering the Shoah, and the founding of the State of Israel. All these ideas gave a rise to the answer in the 20th century of the question, why be Jewish? And now, though, they're all moving from the foreground to the background. And so what is taking its place? What will become of us? Well, let me show you why I'm so optimistic. It's actually Judaism's oldest and most enduring truth. It's Judaism's call to holiness at every moment of every day. When God wandered through the Garden of Eden, God saw Adam and Eve hiding among the fig trees. You see, they ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What does that mean? The rabbis asked, what does that mean? Because they kind of knew some stuff already. What does that mean? It says they knew that they were going to die. They knew that they were going to die, and because they knew of their own mortality, suddenly for the first time they realized that every day mattered. Every single action mattered because they have a finite number of days on earth. And so they become afraid. Am I living my life the way I want to live my life? Am I doing the things that I should be doing with my time? Am I living with my partner in the way that I should be treating my partner? Because we only have a certain number of days left, and that is the basis of ethics, our sense of death and mortality. And they became afraid, and they hid. And right when they hid, God comes and says, Ayeka, where are you? It's not that God didn't know where they were. It's that God said, come on out. Let's have a chat. I want to be in relationship with you. The word Ayeka, that word is only given once in the entire Tanakh. Only once, and it's at this moment. And for the rabbis, it becomes the most enduring question of faith. Calls out every day, saying, where are you? Where are you with your life? How are you making your life holy? The priest in the book of Leviticus reframes this question into a command and says, Kadoshim tihiyu ki ani Adonai kadosh. You shall be holy, for I, God, am holy. Now, over my near decade at Valley Beth Shalom, I've come to know thousands of people. And there are 5 active generations in our community, all with differing narratives, with differing sensibilities, with differing understandings of what it means to be Jewish. Here's what I've learned from those conversations. In all of these generations, I have yet to meet anyone who's never experienced wonder in their entire life. I've never met someone that doesn't understand the spiritual power of being present for each other. I've never met anyone who isn't moved by a baby naming or Brit Milah, who doesn't appreciate being called to the Torah for an Aliyah. I've never met anyone who doesn't dream for themselves or dream from their children, who doesn't aspire to be a better father or mother, brother or sister, son or daughter, who doesn't rise for Kaddish when asked by a friend, who doesn't feel small when you look at the stars and realize how far away they are, but who doesn't feel big when you look at a little one who says Hamotzi, or when she finally puts that ring on her finger, or he finally breaks the glass under the chuppah. It's why we dedicated an entire month to this idea here at VBS. To ask this question, Ayeka, where are you? To draw your attention to the holiness in the everyday matter of your life. And I can prove it to you right now, because as part of the Ayeka experience, we have this art exhibit out there with all these beautiful cards hanging from it, and you wrote answers to questions. Well, the other day I took a look at the wall, and I wrote down a lot of those answers. I'm going to share a few of them with you now. When I asked, where are you? When we asked, where are you? About your relationship, someone once wrote, I'm noticing that my children will only be at home for a few more short years. I'm trying to make sure that I am present for them in this time, and that we still have all of the wonderful time living together in one household. Ayeka, where are you? Another wrote, a lot of people love and respect me, and I have a lot of friends who love me for who I am rather than who they want me to be. Another one, I think written by a kid because of the handwriting, simply wrote, I love Mom. And when we asked you about your creativity, someone wrote, I would like to find some time rediscovering the creative side, maybe working on family photo scrapbooks or other creative outlets. And another person wrote, I'm always trying to be creative in all areas of life, even when making a sandwich. And a beautiful one wrote, I want to make more time to dance. When we asked you about your cheshbon hanefesh, your personal self, one person said, doors are opening and doors are closing, and I'm walking through these wonderful paths and not looking back. Someone else said, transitioning, reaching in to find the courage to move into a new stage, to find clarity and vigor, truth, discipline, and joy. And with your sense of renewal, we asked, Ayeka, where are you? You wrote, I work every day to allow myself to create a new path in my life, which includes learning laughter, fun, friendship, most of all, gratitude and healing. And another wrote, I renew myself as a new mother through the laughter of my child, the love of my husband, and the very occasional sip of wine. Each of these moments are the real grist of life, and we are called every day, Ayeka, where are you? And we answer. We answer with our sense of being. We answer with those sense of moments. And Judaism names those moments. We name those moments by tuning in and listening to the call of holiness. We name them by saying, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotah. Praised are you, ruler of the universe, who makes us holy through mitzvot, through the path of sacred life. That's because holiness is absolutely timeless. There's no less holy time in our lives than right now. And in the world, there's no less holiness today than there was at the day that the Red Seas parted, or the day that we stood at Mount Sinai, or the day the tablets were forged and put in the ark. Today, there is no less holy than it was when the cracking of the radio announced the establishment of the State of Israel, or a few years later over another radio when excitedly they said, Har Habayit b'yadenu, the Temple Mount is in our hands. There is no less holiness today than there was in those times. You didn't leave your holiness behind in your youth. You didn't leave it at your mother's kitchen table. You didn't leave it in your father's study. You didn't leave it behind, for those of you who are wearing their bar mitzvah talitot today, you didn't leave it behind with your bar mitzvah prep. You didn't leave it behind with your talit in the bag. You didn't leave it behind on your grandparents' Seder table. That call to holiness is timeless. It is every day. There were no great heroic times that we can look upon and say, oh, we're nothing. We are so much farther away. That is not true. There were no generation that is more pure than our own. We are all in this together, every generation, ambivalent and irascible, knowledgeable and fearful, and yet passionate, loving, and just. It is a weakening and enervating idea that only the ancients knew God in some fabled once upon a time. There has never been a more holy age than our own, and no less a holy age than our own. Every time a moment passes and you have the opportunity to unearth holiness, you should. Every time you have a smile, a dream, a moment of relationship, of tranquility, at every moment it should be open to holiness, because when we bring those moments to the surface, we realize that Judaism is much deeper than just our Yiddishkeit, our ethnicity, our survivorship, our understanding of surviving the Shoah, and our founding of the State of Israel. Judaism is a power for every day, not just some days. The sparks are scattered everywhere, Martin Buber says. They cling to material things. They're all sealed up in wells and under cupboards and in kitchen tables. And they're just waiting to be set free, and that's our job, to set them free. And let me tell you, for those of you, and I know there are some here who might fear the future of what is going to become of us, let me tell you what God told the first Jew who was uncomfortable with his own history, with his own past, and sawing the world shift under his feet. God said to him, Al tira, do not be afraid. Don't fear the future, because a new generation is rising. It might not look like your Judaism. It might not behave like your Judaism. Jews might not even look like you or act like you, but it is rising. I see Asian Jews, I see black Jews, I know Latino Jews, I see scruffy Jews, I see clean polished Jews. It is rising. I see it in our meditation services, I see it in our playground minyan, I see it in wilderness trips, I see it in political engagement, I see it in social service projects. It is rising. I see it in learning circles and cooking circles. I see it in college campuses and silent retreats. I see it in high holiday services, in sanctuaries, in ballrooms. I see it in high holiday services in tents and in camping sites, and I kid you not, my friend is leading high holiday services in a bowling alley this weekend. It is rising. It might be strange, but it is rising. And I see it in the heavy metal klezmer music that someone introduced me to last week, and in the hip-hop Yiddish music that I was introduced last month. And I see it in graffiti artists that write blessings on the sides of bakeries. And I see it in makeup artists that do crazy Jewish makeup. I see it in Jewish tattoo artists that specialize in Jewish Hebrew tattoos. And I see it in pride marches. I see it in civil rights marches. I see it on birthright buses. I see it on party buses. It is rising. It is rising. It is rising. I see it everywhere. On Hanukkah, One of the most ancient discussions we have about Hanukkah is how to light the Chanukiah. Shammai said, we light 8 candles to 1 candle, because that's how they used to do it in the temple. That's how the sacrifices were made. That's how they dedicated the temple. Hanukkah is about dedication. We light 8 to 1. And then comes Hillel, who knew Judaism was changing. The tectonic plates, the orienting ideas were changing, and Hillel said, no, we light 1 to 8. Because in Jewish life, we understand Ma'alin b'kodesh v'lo yoradin. We go up in holiness, we don't go down. We light one to another, to another. We add one generation to another, to another, to another, and then it will always go up in holiness and never go down, one generation to the next. Letting more and more ideas flow in, more and more light be shed. We rise and we add new ideas. We rise, we add new light. We rise and we add new strength, new culture, new ethnicity. The future is different. It might be strange, but it is bright and it is holy. While these 3 great icons have passed, Gene Wilder, Elie Wiesel, Shimon Peres, the prankster, the prophet, the prime minister, they will not be forgotten. The foundations on which they stood are the foundations for Jewish life. Their memories may always be a blessing. But in the new culture, the new shift, the 21st century, we will add our candles to theirs. We will add their light to theirs. And the next wave of Judaism has a very bright future. Gemar Chatima Tova to each and every one of you. May be sealed in the book of life. And together we say, Amen. We continue on page 654 with Ritzay.